Welcome on into Nashville's Morning News. Appreciate you listening. Want to welcome on into the program Jonathan Fahey. Of course, Jonathan, you've been on the air for the last couple of days. Hopefully, folks getting to know you. Former federal prosecutor, also former director of ICE for a time. Let's talk a little bit about the hush money trial that begins anew today, this morning. I want to talk about Friday, though, and this, what a lot of people are calling this very compelling and emotional testimony from Hope Hicks. Now, for people who don't know, Hope Hicks, she at one time, many years ago, actually served as Donald Trump's press secretary in the early days of his first campaign for the presidency. She went on to become his White House communications director. So Hope Hicks is somebody who, although estranged from Donald Trump now, she was, very much in the thick of things for a long time. A lot of people pointing to this testimony as compelling. What did she say that was so compelling?
Well, I think a lot of it, I would say for the people, the anti-Trump folks that would say the compelling part of her testimony would be the fact that she, talked about the Democrats' favorite issue from before, the Access Hollywood tape, and how that came about, and that was sort of a motivating factor for wanting to do these hush money payments that were made to keep the Stormy Daniels story quiet. So she gave him that. She gave him the fact that he talked about the payments being made, or I think she overheard some things. So I think that, arguably was harmful to President Trump, but I think there was a lot of things that were quite good for President Trump. In that, one, she says had some unkind things to say about, Michael Cohen, who is really going to be the government's or the state's star witness in this case. So again, another person saying bad things about Michael Cohen, who already has enormous credibility issues. And the other thing that I think is quite helpful, because I know your audience probably knows because you've been covering this, but what they have to do is not only prove that these were false book entries as legal fees, but also they were done to influence the election or in violation of, campaign finance laws. And to do that, they have to show the motivation was exclusively to influence the election. And Hope Hicks did not give them that. She said basically, I think both, that it was partially the election, but partially to keep the story away from his family. And again, the story that he was saying is false. So that really undercuts the theory on the felonies pretty dramatically, because I think my understanding of the law is they have to prove that was the reason and no other reason. So I think this testimony ultimately hurt him. Hurt the government. And the other thing that I think the theme of this, and again, it's still Donald Trump makes this it makes it different. But he really looks like, if you were to look at this objectively, he really looks like a victim in this case. All of these people around him are trying to get money out of him and use things to their advantage to basically have him pay them for, to keep quiet and things like that. So he really is sitting there like a victim. And again, we've talked about this before. It's like, this is a case that this type of thing has probably never been brought, and I'm sure if it had been brought, we would have heard about it in the media. So it's just an amazing thing. I think the case ultimately, it's probably going to come down still to Michael Cohen's testimony and the fact they have a heavily anti-Trump jury pool as a general matter. But this case is a real joke. We haven't even heard anything that resembles a crime come out, and I don't know how many days into this we are, a couple weeks in. Yeah. So, the case remains a joke, and, but we'll see how it pans out.
One of the things you touched on it, and I read something, and I can't remember who it was, but there's all this joke about Donald Trump falling asleep in the courtroom. And somebody said that Trump's not falling asleep. He's closing his eyes because he's trying to cope. And that makes sense, because what you just said is something that I've acknowledged and said before, which is everywhere Donald Trump turns, he has these people from his past, and he's got people either making accusations or, making up stories about him that he's got to ultimately decide whether or not he just pays somebody to go away or if he fights it in court. And so for him, that's something that he probably has to deal with all the time. I don't know whether he had an affair with Stormy Daniels or not. The former president denies it, but I know that when it comes to these kind of accusations, for somebody like Donald Trump, it's just another day. Here comes another accusations. Give her money and make her go away. So it actually makes sense to me that he wanted to, as you and I talked about before, he wanted to protect his family. I think that is a big part of it. Now, today, apparently Michael Cohen is going to take the stand. It's almost a joke because is he going to be under oath? Because he's been somebody who's been known to lie a time or two in court.
Yeah, exactly. How often do you see a star witness in a case, and really almost the main witness, it all hinges upon him to be a convicted perjurer, and also he has other multiple lies. And, the thing that's come out during this trial, which I didn't fully appreciate, I thought was probably the case, but he is really angry and resentful at Donald Trump for not bringing him to Washington and giving him, a high-level appointment, which just shows what he presented himself as and what Donald Trump thought of him as were two different things. Donald Trump did not have a high opinion of him even before this came out, and he's angry about that, and I think that clearly came out in the trial. And I think your point about the sleeping or soaking it all in or whatever, it's kind of funny because it's like, yeah, we've all, we don't know what it's like being a celebrity, but he's in a position everyone is always wanting something from him. And, so he's in this trial now, which he knows is just politically motivated. Yeah, he might be close. I mean, we've all been in these Zoom meetings that people will not stop talking, and we all just want to close our eyes and hope they end. And the amazing thing about it, that the media is trying to do this to contrast the fact that Joe Biden can't even stay awake for 30 minutes in a row on any given day. So they're trying to make this say, oh, they're both the same. But the problem is, at the end of every trial day, which is a stressful day, Donald Trump's out there, giving pizzas to firemen, doing rallies, and Joe Biden at this point, it's a struggle for them to have him walk across the lawn. And that's an achievement for him. If he can get across the lawn to the helicopter, that's a big win for today's White House. But I think part of that, they're really trying to build this up because they're trying to take that issue off the table to say, oh, they're both basically similarly situated, which is a complete joke.
Jonathan, one of the things that I've noticed from some of the polling over the weekend is that Biden does continue to struggle, especially with minority voters and young adults as well. Trump doing very well. He was at, I think it was the Grand Prix over the weekend, from what people tell me, in Miami, and he got a great response there. And so it's interesting. My contention is that Biden's out on the campaign trail, and he's not doing well. As a matter of fact, I was telling the folks earlier that within the world of Biden's campaign team, they're now telling the president to shorten his speeches and be more concise. My take on that, my reading on that, is that Biden is just getting lost, as he often does, and you and I talked about earlier. Meantime, the less people see of Donald Trump, the better his numbers seem to be doing. I think, is it because people are beginning to recognize the reason why they're not seeing more of Donald Trump is because he's stuck in this courtroom?
Yeah, ultimately, I think that's right. Yeah, they see less of him, or everything they see is about this trial, and it breaks against, takes away from the issues. But I think you think of Biden campaigning, and you think on every important issue, absent abortion, Trump is way ahead. If you look at immigration, you look at the economy, you look at things like that. And I think the thing with Biden being out on the campaign trail, they just have to do it as almost like sort of a proof of life type of thing. So they have to get him out there to say, look, he can still do it. But every time he talks, it's just a disaster waiting to happen. I mean, it's so embarrassing. And everyone, I'm sure, is just cringing, hoping he gets through it. So I'm sure part of shortening it is they can say, hey, look at him. He spoke to some steel workers and didn't say something crazy, but, and no one will cover the fact he spoke for 90 seconds and was whisked away. But I think and the Democrats know this, and that's part of this lawfare effort, is if the election is decided on either Biden's performance or the issues that are most important, Biden loses. Everyone knows he's inept. He can't, he can't walk to the helicopter anymore. And so I think what the Democrats need to focus on is simply it's going to be abortion and the Donald Trump trials in January 6th. Everything else they know is a loser, so they're going to drive these home. And I think Trump, the polls, I think, it's kind of hard to get a real sense of it. And when you see young people and minorities, how those will ultimately settle out, because they're probably come back to the norms a little bit. But I think the young people are somewhat very disaffected because they did vote in large numbers for Biden, and their lives are not better. They can't buy a home. They're living in their basement. Or their parents' basement, and if you go to college and have to have the government bail you out because of such a catastrophic decision, even if you get that bailout, you can't really be happy with the state of your life, knowing the government has to bail you out of a decision you made. So they're not particularly happy people or happy with the performance. And the other thing that when you look at these right track, wrong track numbers, direction of the country, I mean, they are pathetic. I think it's something like 25%. Roughly 25-30%. And so most people think the country under Joe Biden's leadership is going in a bad direction. That's not exactly something you want to run on. Like 4 more years, you'll be even poorer or less safe. And I think that's really what's going to, I think that's the reality. I mean, and I think people see it as like, there's nothing he's going to do to turn the economy around. He's not going to stand up to the far left on the border, on crime. So to the extent things are bad, they will be worse if he's reelected. I think most people objectively can see that.
You just when you mentioned a chant of 4 more years, it's interesting because can you imagine a stadium full of people chanting 4 more years after the previous 4 years? I mean, under Joe Biden, the jokes write themselves.
Exactly. And can you imagine Biden walking into a stadium, a NASCAR event, a Formula One event, and having anyone do anything other than boo? He knows he can only go into events that are perfectly scripted, maybe with, teachers union members and campaign staffers. Anything else, he's going to get booed and ridiculed, and rightfully so. I mean, historically, this is probably the most disastrous presidency, at least certainly in my lifetime, certainly worse than Jimmy Carter's, which was objectively horrible. So yeah, I think it really is a joke whenever you see Biden out there. I think it just shows weakness. And one last point when I was thinking about this trial, Trump is becoming like Rocky in Rocky 1, where no matter what you throw at him, he keeps coming back stronger. And then you have Biden, on the other hand, that's basically this sort of Mr. Magoo figure that is just cluelessly wandering around. And it does show a great deal of strength on Trump's part, because most of us wouldn't be able to handle even 1/100th or 1,000th of what he goes through. And he does it with so much energy and keeps coming back and keeps fighting. I think that's a leadership quality that I think a lot of young people want to see, somebody that can fight and that fights for our country.
I think the American people see Donald Trump right now as the underdog in the sense that he's got this onslaught of lawfare against him. And you're right. And then what does he do? After a full day in court, he goes and he brings pizza to firefighters. He hangs out with people at Chick-fil-A. He walks into a couple of bodegas. I mean, that's Donald Trump making a massive, massive impact. And we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us here on WTN. Jonathan, always great to have you on.